There's a kind of ache you don't notice at first, the kind that grows quietly in the spaces where you thought love was unquestioned. My name is Eliza, and for most of my life, I believed that being the dependable daughter meant I would always have a place to stand. Not the center, not the favorite, just secure. Like a chair that's always there in the corner of the room. Maybe no one looks at it, but it belongs. I grew up in a house that always smelled like fresh roti and warm milk, especially in the evenings when my mother would hum softly in the kitchen. The walls were a pale cream, slightly cracked near the windows, and the curtains carried that faint scent of detergent and sunlight. It wasn't a perfect home, but it was ours, or at least, that's what I told myself. When I started working, I didn't think twice about helping. At first it was small. Paying the electricity bill when things were tight, bringing groceries home without mentioning the receipt. My father would nod, my mother would say, "Alla tumhain kushrake," and that was enough. It felt good to be useful. Over time, helping stopped being occasional. It became expected. The mortgage payments slowly shifted onto me, though no one ever sat me down to say it outright. It was just understood. If there was a gap, I filled it. If something broke, I fixed it. If money ran short, I covered it. I never kept count. Not because it didn't matter, but because I thought love wasn't something you counted. My younger sister, Sana, was different from me in every way that seemed to matter to our parents. She was softer, more expressive, always surrounded by laughter. When she entered a room, people noticed. When I entered, things simply continued. I didn't resent her. I told myself I didn't. Families are complicated, I would think. Love shows up in different shapes. Maybe mine just looked like responsibility. There were nights when I would sit in my room, the ceiling fan making that slow, ticking sound as it rotated, and I could feel the tiredness in my bones, not just from work but from always being the one who held things together. My hands would still smell faintly of paper and ink from the office, mixed with the spices from the kitchen, and I would wonder, just briefly, what it would feel like to be taken care of instead. But then morning would come, and I would get up and keep going. When Sana got engaged, the house transformed overnight. Bright fabrics draped over chairs, laughter echoed through the hallway, and the sharp, sweet scent of Mendi filled the air. My mother's voice carried excitement I hadn't heard in years. My father walked around with a quiet pride, like something had finally fallen into place. I was happy for her. I really was. I helped with everything. The bookings, the clothes, the endless small expenses that add up faster than anyone admits. Vendors would call my phone. Payments came from my account. It felt natural. She was my sister. One evening, a few weeks before the wedding, my parents asked me to sit with them in the living room. The TV was off, which was unusual. The air felt still, heavy in a way I couldn't explain. I sat down on the old sofa, the fabric slightly rough against my skin. My mother adjusted her dupatta, her fingers trembling just enough for me to notice. My father cleared his throat. "Eliza," he said, not quite looking at me, "we've made a decision." There was a pause, long enough for the ceiling fans ticking to feel louder than usual. "We're giving the house to Sana," my mother added softly, "as her wedding gift." For a moment, I didn't understand the words. They felt misplaced. Like they belonged to someone else's story. "This house?" I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. My father nodded. "It's the right thing to do. She's starting her new life." I could feel something shifting inside me. Not breaking, not yet, just moving. Like the ground wasn't where I thought it was. "I've been paying the mortgage," I said. Not accusing, just stating something that felt obvious. "For years." My mother finally looked at me then, her eyes filled with something between guilt and reassurance. "And Allah will reward you for that, Beta. You've always been the strong one." The strong one. The word settled over me, like something heavy and familiar. My father leaned back slightly. "You're independent, Eliza. You can build your own home. Sana needs this more." There it was. Not cruel. Not loud. Just clear. I remember the faint smell of tea still lingering in the room, even though the cups were empty. The way the light from the window fell across the floor in uneven lines. The sound of a car passing outside. Distant and ordinary, as if nothing had changed. Inside me, everything had. I didn't argue. Not because I agreed, but because, in that moment, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. I wasn't part of this decision. I never had been. The days that followed were filled with wedding noise. Music, chatter, footsteps rushing across the house. I moved through it all like I always did, handling calls, confirming payments, making sure everything went smoothly. No one mentioned the house again. It was as if the conversation had been neatly folded away, like an old receipt no one needed anymore. On the day of the wedding, I stood in my room for a moment before leaving. The air smelled faintly of perfume and pressed fabric. My reflection looked the same as always, composed, steady. But something inside me had gone quiet. Not empty, just quiet. After the wedding, when Sana left with her new husband, the house felt different. Larger somehow. Ishuin. My parents moved around it with a strange mix of relief and nostalgia. A week later, I sat down with them again. I found a place, I said simply. My mother looked up, surprised. What do you mean? I'm moving out. The words landed gently, without force, like placing something down carefully instead of dropping it. My father frowned slightly. There's no need to rush. This is still your home. I held his gaze, not with anger, but with something steadier. It was, I said softly. There was no argument after that. No dramatic scene. Just a quiet understanding settling in the space between us. Moving out was strangely peaceful. I packed my things slowly, touching objects that had once felt permanent. The bookshelf, the chipped mug I always used, the small crack in the wall near my bed. On my last night there, I sat alone in the living room. The ceiling fan hummed above me, the same as it always had. The house still smelled like tea and familiarity, but it no longer felt like mine. And for the first time, that didn't hurt as much as I expected. It felt honest. My new place was small. The walls were plain, the rooms quieter than I was used to. The first night, I sat on the floor with a cup of tea, the warmth of it steady in my hands, and listened to the unfamiliar silence. It wasn't empty. It was mine. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, I built a life that didn't depend on being needed to exist. I bought furniture piece by piece. I learned what it felt like to come home and not immediately look for what needed fixing. My relationship with my parents changed. Not broken, just clearer. I visited sometimes. We talked. There was kindness, but also a space that hadn't been there before. And that space was important, because it reminded me of something I had spent years forgetting. Love without recognition turns into quiet exhaustion. And responsibility without boundaries slowly erases you. Sana's life went on the way everyone expected. The house became hers in every official sense. And that was fine. Because by then, I understood something that made everything else feel lighter. Yedintilostaum. I had found myself. If you're listening to this and something inside you feels familiar, if you've been the one who gives and tells yourself it's enough just to be needed, I want you to hear this gently. You don't have to disappear to be loved. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight for your place. It's to quietly choose a new one where you never have to question it again. Take care of yourself. Truly. Because you deserve a life that doesn't only need you, but sees you too.